Great games have told us what it means to be a hero who protects safety and justice so many times that eventually someone had to ask the opposite question. But to understand how they turned us into the villains, we first have to go back and ask what happened before. Before Rockstar, there was a company called DMA Design. It was founded in Scotland in 1987 by David Jones. During the 90s, DMA became famous thanks to an unexpected hit called Lemmings. And while other studios were trying to create massive productions, DMA stood out by making original games and constantly experimenting. But by the mid-90s, David Jones wanted something completely different: to create a car game with police chases across multiple cities at a time when hardly anyone was even talking about open worlds. In 1995, DMA began development on a new project called Race and Chase, led by several key figures. The original idea actually wasn't what you might imagine. Race and Chase was going to be a multiplayer game focused on racing, crashing, and police pursuits. Players could be either cops or criminals, and the objective was as simple as chasing or escaping. But they ran into a problem that almost got the game cancelled. It just wasn't fun. Then, almost like a stroke of luck, an unexpected bug appeared during development. The police AI started behaving aggressively and unpredictably, and the testers ended up having far more fun causing chaos than they did by actually following the game's own rules. BMG Interactive was the game's publisher, and two fans of American crime movies and urban culture began shaping the rebellious personality of a game that, in 1997, would arrive with a new name taken from the official criminal charge for stealing a motor vehicle, Grand Theft Auto. When the game launched, its marketing campaign was a risky move. BMG contacted Max Clifford, a British public relations expert, and together they created a legend across newspapers and even within British politics that GTA was an inappropriate game that corrupted young people. Thanks to this, it quickly became surrounded by controversy as a forbidden and violent game, a reputation that, ironically, would follow the series with every new release. From that point on, Sam and Dan Houser fell in love with GTA and decided to become much more involved in creating the third game. At the same time, BMG sold its video game division to Take-Two, and that's where the Houser brothers, Terry Donovan, Jamie King, and Gary Foreman founded Rockstar. The Housers began pushing a much more cinematic vision, inspired by films like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, The Warriors, which they would later turn into a video game, Payback, and The Sopranos. Meanwhile, at DMA, Leslie Benzies would begin leading the team that would develop GTA 3. This time, it was going to be in 3D, and while most 3D games at the time were linear, they weren't about to let the freedom of driving around and causing chaos in a huge city disappear. So they chose New York in the late 90s as the setting, because it was the perfect backdrop for a criminal world. It had the Italian mafia, Chinatown, ports used for drug trafficking, corruption, and rival gangs. They called the city Liberty City and divided it into Portland, the industrial working class district, Staunton Island, the financial center, and Shoreside Vale, a quieter residential area, all of it covered in a greenish-gray palette with dull skies, gray streets, and a greenish fog. The Houser brothers and Leslie Benzies shared one obsession, one that would become GTA's defining feature. Instead of building a 3D environment just for the missions, they built a city that would keep functioning even when the player wasn't doing anything. The citizens and public services of Liberty City reacted to all kinds of situations. People would run away, call the police, or fight back. Paramedics would arrive in ambulances if something happened. Police officers would take cover, and the city itself had store schedules, with shops closing their doors at night and certain vehicles only appearing at specific times of day. Naturally, the PlayStation 2 couldn't handle something that ambitious on its own, so they developed a streaming system that loaded the city in real time as you drove through it, saving precious memory. And all of this completely amazed the gaming press. Today it might seem basic, but this was happening back in 2001. GTA 3 was a game where you could drive dozens of vehicles, use a huge variety of weapons, watch taxis driving through the streets, see a working subway system, and interact with reactive NPCs, all inside a fully 3D city. So naturally, it was destined to become a success. But realistically, the game was still somewhat primitive. Not just because of its stiff shooting controls, or the fact that you couldn't move the camera while driving, but also because of its missions and its story. Everything begins with Claude escaping after a bank robbery, only to be betrayed by his girlfriend. He's arrested and taken to Liberty City, but the Colombian cartel attacks the prison convoy, and Claude escapes alongside another prisoner. In the middle of the chaos, the two make it out alive, and thanks to that fellow inmate, Claude begins working for the Leone Mafia, first for Luigi Cotterelli, then Joey Leone and Tony Cipriani, until he eventually proves himself useful and loyal to the boss himself, Salvatore Leone. These early missions serve to teach you the game. They introduce the safe house, the pay and spray garages where you repaint your car to lose your wanted level, ammunition stores where you buy weapons, and even the garages where you can rig cars with bombs. Salvatore wants to destroy the Colombian cartel's operations, and while wipe out the new drug known as Spank. And although you succeed, the boss's girlfriend Maria warns you not to take your next job because Salvatore has decided to betray you. The Yakuza, led first by Asuka Kasin and later by her brother Kenji, take Claude in, and the second act of the game begins after you get your revenge on Salvatore. This is also where the second island opens up, and you start to see why many people consider this the hardest GTA. The game has very little mission variety. Most of the time you're either shooting your way through enemies, picking something up, or chasing down and damaging vehicles. These include some of the most infamous missions in the entire game. Two-Face Tanner forces you to damage the car of an undercover cop and then kill him. But the moment you so much as scratch his vehicle, you instantly get a 4-star wanted level. Something similar happens in A Drop in the Ocean, where you have to chase a plane that's dropping packages before escaping with a 5-star wanted level. Every mission has its trick and can be made much easier once you know what to do, but that doesn't change the fact that some of GTA 3's missions are simply poorly designed. Continuing with the story, Claude also begins working for Donald Love. Since he wants to start a war between the Yakuza and the Colombians, he has Claude kill Kenji while disguised as a Colombian. And by the way, Asuka never finds out that it was you. For the final act of the game, your ex-girlfriend Catalina is revealed as the leader of the Colombian cartel. She kidnaps Maria, sets a trap for you, and the story ends with you blowing up Catalina's helicopter before escaping with Maria, who won't stop talking. Then, just as the screen fades to black, a single gunshot is heard. The story can be described the same way as the game itself. It never fully reaches its potential. In the end, GTA 3 is basically one of the classic GTA games brought into 3D. You can tell that the goal was to create an experiment, see whether it worked, and improve on it later. In short, they made something basic by their own standards. There were boats, but there were no motorcycles, no bicycles, no helicopters, and the only aircraft in the game could barely even be called an airplane. It introduced fantastic features like the radio with famous songs and several stations, although they could become a bit repetitive since they still didn't have a massive licensed music catalog. It also didn't have an interactive map, which in its own way isn't necessarily a bad thing. The game forces you to learn Liberty City and remember where everything is. As for the story, it's mostly about running errands from one place to another with a protagonist who doesn't even speak. Even so, GTA 3 is an incredibly important game. It was the beginning of the creative minds who would go on to tell unforgettable stories in incredible cities, the beginning of the freedom to do whatever we wanted, and the beginning of DMA's transformation into Rockstar North, evolving from an experiment born out of a bug into one of the biggest names in gaming. What I love most about this beginning is something that constantly happens in life, to you watching this video and to me making it, and I really appreciate it if you subscribe and become a member to support the channel. And that's looking back. I imagine all the people who worked on the games that came later looking back at where they started and realizing just how far they'd come, because doing something well doesn't mean it can't be done even better. That mindset is what gives us bigger and better works every time. It's what creates a legacy and even expectations that can eventually turn against you. But you have to be brave, and although we'll dive deeper into Rockstar's highs and lows later on, it's impossible to deny that these people take their time to create masterpieces. They're one of the clearest examples that quantity doesn't mean quality, and that dedication and passion for a project are reflected in the final result and in the people who get to enjoy it. Grand Theft Auto 3 was a fun game that allowed one of the greatest developers we've ever had to take the PlayStation 2 and push it to the limit.